It was the night before Christmas, and my sister had just stretched across the serving dish to ask, loud enough that the whole table caught it. Still no ring at 35? Wow, must be a quiet life, huh? Got a laugh out of everyone. My dad laughed loudest. My mom, mid-toast with her glass still hovering, gave me that gentle little smile of hers and managed, "Oh, you know how she is." I set my wine down. I didn't say a word. None of them had any idea why I was actually sitting in that chair. I hadn't flown home to Ohio to be roasted over the turkey. I'd flown home because a week earlier, a manila folder had crossed my desk with my own name scrawled across the bottom of a contract I had never touched, in handwriting that wasn't mine. Welcome back to Calm Drama Stories. This is the place where we sit with the women who finally stop apologizing, the ones who held everything together until holding it together started eating them alive. Grab a cup of coffee, settle in, leave a comment, and don't forget to subscribe. You should know who I am before I tell you what I did, because the two don't line up the way my family likes to pretend. I'm an acoustician. I design rooms that hold sound the way a good mug holds coffee. No splash, no echo, nothing wasted. Recording studios, lecture halls, a children's hospital in Chicago where the monitors hum softer now because I taught the walls how to absorb the sharp edges out of them. I built my practice from a rented desk and a borrowed calibration mic. Today, people fly me across the country just to make their quiet sound right. My family knows none of this in any way that matters. To them, I'm the daughter who got away, the one who never married on the family's preferred timeline, the one whose whole life is a punchline between the rolls and the pie. I hadn't been back to Columbus in 2 years. I hadn't planned on coming this year either. Then Dale, an old technician who still worked the Bennett acoustics floor and still remembered who taught him how to solder, called me on a Tuesday and said, "Keep this between us, Mia. They're about to close a deal on the panel line. Investors, real money. And your dad keeps telling them the designs are clean, all signed over, all in the family." He paused. "But I never saw you sign anything. Did you?" I hadn't. That's when I booked the flight. Not for the roast, not for the toast. For a single sentence in a document I needed to see with my own eyes before I let anyone convince me I was making it up. Because a signature is nothing until it's yours, and it's yours until somebody decides it belongs to the family too. But that was still folded up inside me at the dinner table, and my family had no clue. Chloe was on a roll by then. My little sister runs marketing for the firm, which mostly means she's good at picking which version of a story people get to hear. "I'm just saying," she went on, working a carrot around her plate. "Some of us made choices, some of us built things. Mia ran off to do, what is it again? Making rooms quiet?" More laughter. My father put his fork down and did the thing he always does, the thing that once made me feel chosen when I was small. He stretched both hands out like he was blessing the whole table and said, Now, this family built something real. 50 years of the Bennett name on that building." He glanced around, warm, certain. "Whatever any of us does, we do it for the name. The name comes first. It always has." Everybody nodded, like scripture had been read. My mother topped up the glasses and murmured, "Let's not turn the meal into all that," which is what she says whenever anything true tries to lift its head off the floor. I felt the old gravity pulling me to fold, to join the joke, to take up less space so the evening could stay easy. 15 years I'd been doing that from a distance. 15 years of being the quiet place where nobody had to hear the hard thing. I looked at my glass. I looked at my mother, radiant and poised, wine raised halfway to the ceiling, and for the first time in a very long time I didn't fold. I just set my drink down on the tablecloth softly, the way you put down something you've finally finished carrying. "Don't worry about me," I said. My voice came out flat, almost tender. "I've been married for a long time." The table didn't go quiet so much as go vacuum sealed. You have to understand, I know silence professionally. I can tell you the difference between a room that's empty and a room that's holding its breath. This was the second kind. My mother's wine glass stalled midair, tilted halfway through the toast, the kitchen light still catching the rim. Her smile lingered on her face a fraction of a second too long. The way a photograph keeps smiling after the person has walked out of frame. Chloe's fork clinked against her plate. You're what? Married? I folded my hands flat on my lap. 6 years, actually. My father's eyebrows drifted up toward a hairline that had been retreating for a decade. 6 years, he said slowly, like a number that wouldn't add up no matter how he stacked it. You've been married 6 years and you never told your own family? And there it was, before the plates were even cleared. The pivot. Not, are you happy? Not, who is he? But, how could you keep something from us? As if the keeping was the crime. My mother finally lowered her glass without drinking. Her hand was shaking, just barely. Mia, she said, her voice gone thin. Why would you keep that to yourself? I looked at all of them. These people who had spent a decade turning my life into a bit they told over dinner. And I thought about how you explain to someone that you don't hand your happiness to a person who has shown you, in detail, what they do with the things you love. But I didn't say that. Not yet. I just said, because I wanted one thing that was only mine. The questions came in a rush, the way they do when people are less curious than blindsided. What's his name? What does he do? Why isn't he here? Is he embarrassed of us? That last one was Chloe, and she meant it to sting, and it would have once. I gave them almost nothing. His name is Adrian. He's away on business. No, he's not embarrassed. Yes, it's real. There are rings and a lease and a life. I kept my answers short. Not out of cruelty, but out of instinct, the same instinct that makes you cup your hand around a candle flame in a wind. My father leaned back and studied me with an expression I hadn't seen on him before, an expression that would only make horrible sense later. Well, he said, full of surprises. My mother reached over and brushed my wrist, and for one dangerous second, I almost softened, almost let the warmth in. We just want to be part of your life, sweetheart, she said. And I wanted to believe her so badly it scared me. But I hadn't flown in from Chicago and rented a car at the Columbus airport to be part of any life. I had come for a document, and sitting there with my mother's fingers on my wrist and my sister's laughter still hanging in the air like cigarette smoke, I understood something clean and cold. They thought tonight's surprise was the loudest thing in the room. It wasn't. The loudest thing was in a manila folder inside a filing cabinet 3 feet away with my name forged at the bottom, and I was the only person at that table who knew it was there. Let me take you back 11 years, because you can't understand the folder without understanding the panel. When I was 24, Bennett Acoustics was 3 months from going under. I'd already left home at 20. Left the noise, left the smallness. But I still drove back on weekends then. I still believed a family was a thing you could fix with enough of your own 2 hands. The firm was making ordinary sound panels, the gray kind you've seen in 1,000 dropped ceilings, and nobody was buying them anymore. So I sat in the back workshop through a winter and designed something new. A layered baffle core tuned so a room could stay warm without going muddy. A panel that didn't just mute sound but shaped it. I built the first one with my own hands. I signed the inside of the frame where nobody would think to look. The way a luthier signs the belly of a violin, my initials and a line I believed in. That panel saved the company. The orders came back. The Bennett name stayed on the building for another decade because of a design a 24-year-old girl built in the cold while her breath misted in the stairwell. And then, slowly, the way these things always go, the story got retold without me in it. It became the Bennett panel. It became Dad's turn. I let it happen. I told myself credit didn't matter. That I had my own work now, my own city, my own quiet. I told myself letting them have it was some kind of love. That was the lie I'd been sleeping inside for over a decade, smooth as a sealed room. And now that same panel, my panel, was the centerpiece of a deal worth more money than my father had ever seen in one place. And somewhere in a folder, my name was pretending to have agreed to give all of it away. The next morning, I drove out to the firm, told everybody I wanted to see the old place dressed up for the holidays. That part was even a little true. Bennett Acoustics looked prosperous in a way it never had when I was a kid. Fresh paint, a glass-walled conference room, a brass plaque by the door with the founding year and my father's name embossed like a coat of arms. There were visitors on the floor, men in good coats, a woman carrying a leather portfolio, the unmistakable careful politeness of people trying to decide whether to write a very large check. My father was in his element, walking them past the display wall, his voice carrying. "Everything you see, we own outright," he was saying. "Every patent, every design, all of it assigned to the company, clean as a whistle, signed and sealed years ago. We keep it in the family." The buyers nodded. The woman wrote something down, and I stood by a rack of holiday cards, feeling the floor tilt very slightly under me, because I knew. I knew that at least one of those signatures had never been given. If you've ever walked back into a house that shrunk you the second you crossed the threshold, you already know the sound. I mean, a room full of easy talk you're not part of, about a thing you made. Stay with me. It quiets down before it gets loud. Comment where you're watching from and subscribe so you don't miss how this ends. I watched my father shake a buyer's hand. I watched him say the word clean again, and I decided, standing there with a snowflake melting on my coat sleeve, that I was going to read that document before I let anybody sell my name. I asked, casual as a posted note, if I could look at the IP paperwork. I framed it as professional curiosity, one designer admiring how a clean assignment gets structured, nothing more. Chloe intercepted me before the sentence was fully out of my mouth. She'd always had good instincts for exactly the wrong moment. "Why would you need to see that?" she said, arms folded, smile bright and sharp. "You don't really work here, Mia. You haven't in years. It's kind of not your business anymore." I told her I was just interested. She tilted her head. "See, this is the thing about you." Her voice lifted just enough for the room to catch it. "You disappear for 15 years. You show up with a secret husband. And now you want to dig around the deal that's about to set this whole family up for life. People might think you're bitter." She laughed lightly, performing for the two employees within earshot. My mother, passing with a tray of cookies for the guests, caught the tail of it and said, without even slowing down, "Oh, she's just teasing. Mia, don't make that face." There it was again. The little phrase that turns every knife into a joke and every joke into your fault. "She's just teasing." I'd heard it my whole life. It's a spell, that sentence. It makes things disappear. It had made my hurt disappear for 35 years, and it was about to be asked to make a felony disappear. But I smiled and I let it slide. And I muttered something about needing air, because I'd realized that asking permission was the wrong play. You don't ask the people who forged your name whether you may see the forgery. So, I stopped asking and I started looking on my own. Dale found me by the loading dock, hands tucked into his coveralls, breath fogging in the cold. "You didn't hear it from me," he said, and led me to a side office where a due diligence binder sat open on the table, tabbed and photocopied for the buyers to flip through. There was nobody else in the room. He stood in the doorway, keeping an eye on the hall, while I turned to the tab, marked Intellectual Property Assignments. And there it was, a one-page assignment agreement transferring all rights, title, and interest in the chambered baffle design from the inventor to Bennett Acoustics Incorporated. Dated 5 years back, signed on the line that read, "Inventor, Mia Bennett." My whole body went still in the particular way it does when your professional brain takes over, because the rest you can't. I looked at the signature. I have signed my name maybe 100,000 times. I know its rhythm the way you know your own heartbeat. This was not it. Close. Someone had tried. Someone had a sample to copy from. But the M was wrong, too round. The tail of the final T crossed the wrong way. And the whole thing sat too neatly on the line, without the slight downhill drift my hand has carried since the 4th grade. Somebody had practiced. Somebody had sat down with an example of how I write my name and rehearsed it until it was good enough to fool a stranger. Not good enough to fool me. I stood in that borrowed office with December light coming, gray through the blinds, and I felt something I had spent 15 years refusing to feel about these people. Not sadness, not anger, not yet. Just a cold, clean certainty. Someone in my own family had sat down and learned to be me. I did what I always do when the ground moves. I gathered data. I photographed the page, both sides, in good light, the way you're supposed to. Then I checked the date against my own life, because a signature is a claim about where a person was, and where a person was can sometimes be proven. 5 years ago, the date on the assignment was in April. And in that April, I had not been in Ohio, not anywhere close. I'd been in Rotterdam, giving a talk at an international acoustics conference, my name in a printed program, my face in a group photo taken on the stage, my passport stamped, my hotel invoice billed to my own account. I remembered it because it had rained the entire week, and I'd given the talk of my life to a room that finally understood what I did. On the day that document claimed I sat in Columbus and signed away the best thing I ever built, I was 4,000 miles away in the rain, being taken seriously. This wasn't a filing error. Nobody accidentally signed somebody else's name onto a page. Nobody accidentally backdates a signature. This was a decision, made by a person with a pen, who chose to put my name where my consent should have been, because it was easier than asking me. Or because they already knew what I'd say. I closed the binder the way I'd found it. I thanked Dale with my eyes, not my mouth, because his job lived inside those walls. And I walked back out into the lobby where my father was laughing with the buyers. And I smiled at him and I thought, I know now. I know. And you don't know that I know. And I let myself have that, just for a day, like a coal in a cold coat pocket. That evening, I helped my mother in the kitchen because I needed to know how deep the water actually went. And my mother has never in her life been able to keep something she thinks is sweet. I dried. She washed. I kept my voice at the temperature of small talk. It's funny, I said. I don't even remember signing anything over to the company back then. Her hands slowed in the suds. Oh, sweetheart, you didn't have to worry about any of that, she said, warm, reassuring, the way you'd comfort a child who's woken up from a bad dream. Your father looked after the paperwork for you. You were always so busy with your rooms, he said. Why make her fuss with forms when it all stays in the family anyway? He handled it. He handles everything. She smiled at me, proud of him, proud of the arrangement, entirely unaware that she had just confirmed it. My father had signed my name. My mother knew, in the soft way she knows everything and questions nothing, and to her it wasn't a crime. It was a courtesy. A man lifting a small burden off his daughter's shoulders. The name comes first, she added, drying her hands, echoing him without realizing she was quoting anything at all. You know how he is. I did know how he was. I was just beginning to understand how much I'd been letting that stand in for what he was allowed to be. I finished drying the last plate and set it in the rack, and asked, as lightly as I could, whether Dad was still up, because there was no point circling the runway anymore. If my father had done this thing and believed it was love, then I needed to hear him say so right to my face, with no buyers watching. I found him in his study, a bourbon in his hand and the ledger he still keeps on paper. I shut the door. I didn't raise my voice. I've learned that the calmest voice in the room is the one people finally listen to. Dad, I said, there's an assignment in the buyer's binder with my signature on it. I never signed it. You did. He didn't flinch. He didn't even bother pretending to be confused. He looked up at me with something that was almost pride and said, so, you found it. Like I'd solved a puzzle he'd left out for me. You made that panel under this roof, Mia. You were a Bennett, using Bennett tools in a Bennett building. That design was always ours. All I did was finish the paperwork you were too busy to do. That's not stealing. That's a father cleaning up after his kid, same as I've always done. That's not cleaning up. That's forgery, I said quietly. Forging a signature is a crime. He waved the bourbon glass. Family isn't a crime. You want to know a crime? Walking out and letting the company that raised you go under. And then, for just a moment, the armor slipped and I saw the wound underneath. My father did the same thing to me, he said, staring at the ledger. First panel line I ever drew. He put the company name on it and mine nowhere. I grieved it for a year. Then I understood. That's how a family survives. You feed the name and the name feeds you. He looked up at me. I did you a kindness. Someday you'll see it. He believed every word. That was the worst part. He wasn't a villain twirling a mustache. He was a man who'd been robbed when he was young and decided the theft was a tradition worth handing down. I told him I wanted my name off the deal. I told him the assignment was void because I never gave it. That's just the law, I said, not a threat. That's when the warmth drained out of the room like bathwater. My father is never colder than the second you stop being useful to the story he's trying to tell. Off the deal, he repeated. Mia, do you have any idea what closes next week? Do you understand how many people's jobs are resting on that panel line? Dale, the whole floor. Your mother's retirement is in this company. He stood up. If you blow this up over a signature, over your pride, that's not me destroying this family. That's you. Everyone will know it was you. And there it was, the oldest tool in the house, sliding into my hands whether I wanted it or not. The responsibility. Make yourself small so the room can stay smooth. Be the one who carries the thing nobody else will carry. Be the good daughter, the strong one, the one who sacrifices. I felt the pull of it in my chest, like gravity. Because I've always been the one who absorbs the cost so nobody else has to. That's my wound, if you want to call it that. Not that I trust too easily. I trust almost nobody. It's that I have believed my whole life that love means being the person who disappears so everyone else can stay comfortable. And standing in my father's study, watching him hand me the blame for a crime he committed, I finally saw the shape of the machine I'd been fueling. It ran on me. It had always run on me. It was running on me right this minute. And it was counting on the fact that I would rather burn quietly than let anybody else feel the heat. I didn't answer him. I walked out of the study through the dark house, and I drove to the firm one more time that night. I had a key from Dale, and I told the night guard I'd left a scarf behind. What I really wanted was to stand in front of the wall. Because in the lobby, mounted under a spotlight, framed like art, hangs the very first panel, panel 001. The original. The one I built with my own hands in a cold workshop when I was 24. There's a small brass card beside it now that reads, "The Bennett Panel, the design that built our future," along with the company logo and my father's name as founder. My name is nowhere on that card. I stood there a long time. Then I did the thing I'd come to do. I lifted the frame off its bracket carefully, gently. It's heavier than it looks. And I turned it over and I looked at the back of the panel, where no buyer ever looks, where no plaque ever reaches. And there, in the pale wood of the inner frame, in the small block letters of a 24-year-old who thought she was signing something. Only she would ever see it still said what I'd written 11 years ago, MB. And beneath it, the line I had believed in, the room where you can finally hear yourself think. I ran my thumb over the letters. They were mine, they'd always been mine. The front of the panel belonged to the family, to the name, to the deal, to the story they told buyers in good coats. But the back of it, the part that held everything up, the part that did the actual work of shaping the silence, that was me. Hidden, load-bearing, uncredited. Exactly like the daughter. And I stood there in the dark lobby, and I said it out loud to no one, quiet as a closed room. Forgiveness isn't a signature. I sat in the rental car in the empty lot with my phone in my hand and my husband's name on the screen. And I want to be honest with you about what I almost did. Adrian is an investor. That's the plain word for it. He's a partner at a fund. He moves money, and he moves the people who move money. And in the world where this deal was about to close, he is not a small man. One phone call. That's all it would have taken. He could have made a quiet inquiry, leaned on the right relationship, and the whole deal could have simply evaporated before anybody signed a thing. Or he could have swept in and funded the company himself and bought my family's gratitude for the rest of their lives. I could have made all of this disappear. Or I could have made myself the hero who bailed them out. Either way, I'd have walked back into that house, holding the one card that would finally make them see me. I sat there with my thumb hovering over his name for a long time. I want you to remember that I could have, because what I did instead is the entire point of this story. If a boundary has ever cost you something real, you already know exactly where I was, sitting in a cold car at midnight deciding whether to win the wrong way. Hit subscribe and stay with me, because this is the part I got right. I didn't call him to ask him to fix it. I set the phone down in the cup holder, because using Adrian to erase this, whether by killing the deal or by rescuing it, would have made me exactly what my father was. Somebody who solves a problem of truth by burying it under power. And I did not fly home to become my father. I flew home to stop being his tradition. The next morning, before I decided anything final, I called someone who owed me nothing and would tell me the truth. An intellectual property attorney in Chicago I had worked with on a licensing matter years earlier. I laid it out plainly. A design I created. An assignment I never signed. My father's hand on the pen instead of mine. A sale about to close on the strength of that page. She listened, and then she gave it to me straight, the way good lawyers do. Mia, if you didn't sign it, that assignment is void. Not weak. Void. A forged signature transfers nothing. Which means legally you never gave up that design. You still own it. I asked what that meant for the deal. It means the company doesn't hold clean title to the thing they're selling. When the buyer's people do their diligence and ask the inventor to confirm the chain of title, and they will ask, you'd either have to ratify it or tell the truth. If you tell the truth, they cannot close. Not the way it's papered now. And the forgery itself, she paused. That's a criminal matter in Ohio. But that part isn't yours to prosecute or to forgive. That part just is. I thanked her and hung up and sat with it. Here was the thing that changed everything. The leverage in this room had never been my husband's money, or my family's name. The leverage was a single signature I had not given and would not give. Not a weapon I had to go find. A weapon that was simply the truth of where I'd been, and what I'd never agreed to. All I had to do to bring down the whole cleaners. A whistle story was refuse to lie. The quietest possible act and the most expensive one. They could smell something had shifted. Families like mine have antennae for the exact moment the quiet one stops being quiet. My mother started hovering, refilling my coffee before it was empty. Asking if I was sleeping all right. If the marriage was all right. If I was all right. Each question a small hand testing a door. That afternoon, she sat beside me on the porch and took my hand and said the thing she'd clearly been sent to say. Whatever you and your father are tangled up about, she said, please, sweetheart, let's keep it in the family. We don't air these things. We don't let strangers into our business. That's how we've always survived. Keep it in the family. It was the grown-up version of she's just teasing. Same spell, higher stakes, the words we used to make sure the truth never got past the front door. Chloe was different now too. She'd stopped needling me. That very evening she brought me tea I hadn't asked for, sat on the arm of my chair and said sweetly, you know I love you, right? However things shake out. She had never once said that to me sober, and that was when I understood. They'd smelled the danger, and the whole house was rearranging itself around it, managing me, softening me, folding me back in before I could do anything that couldn't be taken back. My mother squeezed my hand. You've always been our strong one, she said, and I sat there on the cold porch and felt the walls of the old house lean in, warm and loving and absolutely determined to keep me exactly where I'd always been, inside, quiet, holding everything up. My father, it turned out, had called a family meeting for the morning before the closing. All of us together to decide, he said, what was best for everyone. The family meeting was held at the long dining table, where 3 nights earlier I'd been the punchline. Now I was at the head of the table, without anyone admitting they'd put me there. My father opened like a man addressing a boardroom, hands folded, voice grave. We're at a crossroads as a family, he said. There's been a paperwork question, and we need to resolve it together, the way Bennetts always have, quietly, lovingly. Then he slid a single page across the polished wood toward me and a pen on top of it, a new assignment, fresh, dated this week, ready for a real signature this time, mine. To paper over the fake one, to make the lie retroactively true, to let the deal close as if none of it had ever happened. All you have to do, my father said gently, is sign what you would have signed anyway, and it's finished. No mess, no strangers. Just family, taking care of family. My mother was crying softly. Chloe was watching me with an intensity that had nothing to do with love. Every person at the table was leaning toward me, waiting, and I felt the full weight of it. The whole house pressing me to do the smooth thing, the quiet thing, the thing I had done my entire life. Sign and be the strong one. Sign and keep the peace. Sign and disappear again so everyone could stay comfortable. I looked at the pen. I looked at the line where my name was supposed to go, willingly this time, and I understood that this was the trap the machine had been building toward all along. Not to forge me once, but to make me forge myself, to get me to volunteer for my own eraser and call it love. I didn't sign it that morning. I said I needed to think, and I took the page with me, which no one had expected. The meeting broke up uneasy, but something else broke open that same day, and it came from Chloe. My sister, who runs marketing, who is very good at finding out which version of a story is true, had spent the days since the dinner doing what I should have known she'd do. She'd looked into Adrian. She found him fast. His name is not a common one, and his fund is not invisible if you know where to look. And by that afternoon, Chloe knew exactly who my husband was. A partner at a firm with real weight in exactly the world where our family's little deal was trying to close. She came to find me in the guest room, and her whole face had changed. The mockery was gone. In its place was something I'd never seen aimed at me before. Calculation, and under it, hope. "Mia," she said, breathless, sitting down without being invited. "Your husband, Adrian, do you know who he—" "Of course you know who he is." "He's your husband?" She laughed, a little wild. "Why didn't you say something? This changes everything." And I watched, almost fascinated, as the story the family had been telling for 35 years, pitiable, single, lesser, the joke, dissolved in real time and reassembled into a new one. I was not the punchline anymore. I was the connection. I was the exit. I was suddenly, and for the first time, worth being polite to. And I knew with sinking certainty exactly what they were about to ask me for. Not forgiveness, not even my signature now. Something bigger, and dirtier, and dressed up in the language of family. By that evening, the whole family knew, and the whole family had rearranged itself around the new information with a speed that would have been impressive if it hadn't been so sickening. My father poured me the good bourbon I'd never once been offered. My mother kept brushing my hair, and then they made the ask, all of them in relay, so no single person had to carry the full ugly shape of it. Couldn't I just have a word with Adrian? Couldn't he make an introduction, smooth things over with the buyers of his fears, maybe put in a little of his own money, so the deal never even needed my messy signature at all? Or Chloe's idea, delivered bright as a ribbon. Couldn't Adrian just make the whole diligence problem vanish, the way men like him make things vanish? "You have this incredible resource," my father said, spreading his hands like a benediction. "And you'd let the family sink rather than make one phone call. After everything." He shook his head, wounded, magnificent. "The name comes first, Mia, it always has. And right now, the name needs you." And there it was. The third time I'd heard that line in a week, and the first time I understood it completely. The name comes first had never meant the family protects its own. It had always meant the family uses whoever it has to. For 15 years, the name had been using me by turning me into a joke. Now it would use me by turning me into a savior. Same machine, same fuel. The only thing that had changed was the price tag on my head. I looked at these people I loved and could not trust, holding out their hands for a rescue built on burying a crime. And I finally saw the whole tradition clearly enough to break it. I did call Adrian that night, but not to ask him to save anybody. I stepped out into the cold backyard, where the Christmas lights my father had strung blinked red and green in the snow, and I told my husband everything. The folder, the forged signature, Rotterdam, the panel, the family meeting, the ask. He was quiet in the way that means he is actually listening, which is one of the 10,000 small reasons I married him. When I finished, he didn't offer to fix it. He knows me better than that. "What do you want to do?" he asked. Not what should we do. What do you want? I told him I wanted to tell the truth and let the truth do whatever the truth was going to do. There was a pause. You should know something, he said carefully. If our fund has any connection to the buyer on this, and given the sector, it might, then the second your name is on anything, I have to recuse. Declare the conflict. I cannot touch it, and I would not want to. I said, good. I said, that was exactly right. Because that was the whole difference, wasn't it? Standing in the snow between two houses I'd lived in. My family's instinct was to use every relationship as leverage. My husband's instinct was to step back from a table the moment his presence could bend it. One of them thought power meant making problems vanish. The other thought integrity meant refusing to be the reason a problem stayed hidden. I stood in the yard a while after we hung up, watching my breath, watching the lights blink on my father's careful, cheerful, dishonest little display, and I knew what I was going to do at the closing. I just had to survive the last night to get there. I stayed up most of that night at the little desk in the guest room, and I did the least dramatic and most important thing of my life. I wrote a letter, not to my family, to the buyer's counsel and the accountants handling the diligence. A short, factual statement, the kind I write for a living. No anger in it anywhere. I am the inventor of the chambered baffle design. I did not sign the assignment dated April 5 years ago. On that date I was in Rotterdam and I can prove it. I do not ratify that assignment now. I hold the rights to the design. I printed it. I signed it, my real signature, the one with the downhill drift, the one that's actually mine. And I sealed it in an envelope and set it by my keys. And I sat with what it meant, because I owed it to myself to look at the cost with my eyes open. Delivering that letter would not just embarrass my father. It would stop the deal cold. There would be no clean closing, no lifeline of investor money. Maybe no company at all in the shape they'd built. Dale might lose his job. My mother's retirement might shrink. The Bennett name, 50 years on that building, might come off the wall. All of it would be traceable. If anyone wanted to trace it to one woman's refusal to lie, I did not pretend otherwise. I did not tell myself it would be fine. It was not going to be fine. This was the line. And once I crossed it, there was no version of the morning where I got to be the good daughter again. I put my hand on the envelope in the dark, and I did not take it back. My mother came to me before dawn. She must have heard me moving, or maybe she just knew the way she knows everything and names none of it. She sat on the edge of the guest bed in her robe, small in the gray light, and she took my hand and she made her last appeal, and she aimed it without knowing it directly at the deepest part of me. You've always been our strong one, she said, ever since you were little, the one who could carry things, the one who never needed as much. Chloe falls apart. Your father's all pride. But you were always the one who could hold the family up without complaining. Her eyes filled. Please don't become the one who breaks it. Please sign the paper. Make the call. Be who you've always been for us. Just this once more. And I understood that she wasn't being cruel. She was telling me the truest thing she knew, that my entire worth in this house had always been my willingness to disappear under the weight of everyone else. That they loved me in their way precisely for how much of myself I was willing to give up. It was the most honest thing anyone had said to me all week, and it was breaking my heart, and I still could not do what she asked. I held her hand and I looked at her and I said it gently, so she would know it wasn't a slam of the door. Mom, I forgive him, I forgive all of you. But forgiveness isn't a signature. She didn't understand. I watched her not understand. And I realized that the language I'd finally learned to speak was one my mother had spent her whole life making sure nobody in this family could hear. After she left, I sat in the thin dawn and finally faced the thing I'd been sidestepping my whole adult life. I had told myself for 15 years that my silence was generosity, that letting them have the panel, the credit, the story, was a gift I gave out of love and strength. That staying away and staying quiet protected everyone. But sitting there with an envelope by my keys, I saw it for exactly what it was. My silence had never protected anyone. It had funded them. Every year, I let the joke land without answering. I taught Chloe that dropping me was free. Every time I let my father tell the buyers the design was his, I taught him that taking from me carried no cost. Every time my mother said, "She's just teasing," and I smiled, I helped build the exact machine that had now forged my name and asked me to thank it for the effort. I had not been holding the family up. I had been holding the lie up. And the strong one, the one who could carry things, the one who never needed as much. That wasn't a compliment. It was a job description for a person they'd trained to absorb whatever the family didn't want to feel. The cruelest trick wasn't the forged signature. It was convincing me that my own eraser was a virtue. I watched the sky go from gray to a pale cold gold over the neighbors' roofs, and something in me that had been clenched since childhood finally let go. I didn't want revenge. I want you to understand that, because it matters. I didn't want to burn them down. I only wanted to stop being the fuel. And there is exactly one way to stop being fuel, and it is to refuse out loud. To catch fire quietly. The closing was set for 10 in the glass conference room at the firm. I walked in wearing my own coat, carrying my own envelope, and I took a seat at the table without being offered one. The buyer's team was there. The woman with the leather portfolio, 2 lawyers, an accountant with a laptop. My father sat at the head in his best suit, expansive, gracious. The founder about to be rewarded for 50 years. My mother sat against the wall with her hands folded in her lap. Chloe stood near the door, phone in her hand, ready to spin whatever happened into whatever the family needed it to mean. The papers were stacked and tabbed and beautiful. My father was midway through a story about the early days, the workshop, the vision, and the buyers were smiling, and it was all going so smoothly, so clean as a whistle, that for a moment I could see exactly how it would have gone if I'd never come home. Then the accountant looked up from his laptop and said the thing I had been waiting a week to hear. "Before we finalize the IP transfer, please, routine, we just need the inventor of the core design to confirm the assignment on the record." Standard for the chain of title. He looked around the table. "Is the inventor available?" And every head in that room turned slowly toward me. My father's smile held, but his eyes came to mine, with a warning in them and a plea, and underneath both of those, the absolute certainty that I would do what I had always done. The room was so quiet, I could hear the heating system breathe. I set my envelope on the glass, and I understood that the next thing I said would decide who I had actually become. My father moved first, smooth as ever. "That's my daughter Mia, the inventor." "Yes, of course." He slid the fresh assignment across the table toward me. The clean one, the retroactive one, the pen already resting on top. "She's just confirming what she signed years ago. Go ahead, sweetheart." His voice was warm and certain, and it filled the whole room, and everyone waited, and my mother's hands tightened in her lap, and Chloe held her breath by the door. All I had to do was pick up the pen. One signature and the family would be saved. The deal would close, and I'd walk out of that room as the hero who'd rescued everyone, finally, permanently loved. I looked at the pen. I looked at my father, and I set the pen down deliberately on the glass and slid it back an inch toward him. "I'm not confirming it," I said. My voice didn't shake. "Because I never signed it." The words landed in that quiet room like a dropped tray. The buyer's lawyer sat forward. The accountant's fingers went still on his keys. "The assignment in your binder is dated April 5 years ago." I went on, evenly, professionally, the way I'd say a room's reverb was too long. "On that date, I was in Rotterdam, presenting at a conference. I have the program, the photographs, the passport stamp, the hotel invoice. I did not sign that document. Someone signed it for me." I opened my envelope and laid my statement on the table where the buyer's counsel could reach it. "I am the inventor of that design. I never assigned it, and I am not going to ratify it now to make this deal easier." My father's face was doing something I had never seen it do in 35 years, and into the silence, calm as a sealed room, I said the sentence I had been walking toward my whole life. "I forgive you, Dad. I'm still not signing." The family recovered faster than the lawyers did, because the family had a backup plan and the lawyers didn't. Chloe was across the room in 3 steps, low and urgent in my ear. Mia, call Adrian right now. Fix this. He can make this whole thing disappear. 1 call. Please. My mother was standing now, pale, saying my name like a question, and my father found his voice and pivoted the entire pitch in real time, turning to the buyers with a rueful, charming laugh. A family misunderstanding, that's all. My daughter's very well connected. Her husband's fund, I'm sure we can restructure, bring in the right partners. And I realized they were all still, in this exact moment, reaching for the same tool. Use the connection, use the husband, use whatever leverage was nearest to make the truth go away. It would have been so easy. I could have picked up my phone. I could have let Adrian's name enter the room and watched the whole thing bend around it. The deal saved, my family grateful, the crime dissolved in money, and me at the center of it all, finally powerful, finally seen. That was the offer. That had always been the offer, and I said no, not by making a call, by refusing to make one. I am not going to ask my husband to fix this. I said it to the whole room, to my father, to the buyers. He's already recusing himself. There may be a conflict, and he will not touch it, and neither will I use him to bury this. If you want the design, you'll license it from me. In writing. Honestly. On the record. And the company will have to answer for how my name got on a document I never signed. I felt the win and the loss arrive together in the same breath, inseparable. I had my name back. I had my voice, my truth, a marriage I would never have to hide again. And I watched my mother look at me across that glass table and choose in her silence the name over her daughter. And I let that cost land, because it was the price, and I had decided to pay it. My father lost the thing he had held on to all his life, his composure. He came up out of his chair with his face gone red and his voice cracking open in front of the buyers, in front of everyone. After everything this family gave you, he said, too loud now, the founder's polish gone. You'd destroy it over a piece of paper, over your pride. You always thought you were better than us, better than the name. He slammed his hand on the glass and the buyers flinched. The name comes first, and I let him finish it this time, let the line hang there in the ruined room. And then I answered it quietly, the way you end a sound by absorbing it instead of fighting it. No, Dad. The truth comes first. The name is just what you called it when you wanted us to stay quiet. He had no answer. There isn't one. Chloe had stopped moving, her phone dark in her hand, staring at me like she was seeing a stranger, or maybe seeing me for the first time. And my mother who had said she's just teasing my whole life, who had asked me one more time to disappear for the family. My mother put her hand over her mouth and turned her face away from me and toward my father. She chose in the worst moment, with everything laid bare. She chose the man, and the name, and the comfortable lie, over the daughter telling the truth. I had known she would. I had prepared for it all night. It broke my heart anyway, cleanly all the way through, the way only the loss you saw coming can. The buyers were gathering their papers. The deal was over, and I stood up in the wreckage of my family's careful story, feeling lighter than I had in 15 years, and more alone, both at once, forever. Here is what I want you to notice about what happened next, because it is the part that matters most. Nobody was crushed by anyone else's power. No fund swept in to punish my family. No connected husband made a phone call. What happened was that the truth, once it was on the record, did what truth does. The buyer's lawyers, professionals who had a duty they could not unknow, could not close on intellectual property with a broken chain of title, so they paused the deal to review it. The accountant flagged the assignment in his notes. The buyer's counsel advised correctly that the company needed to clean up its records, which meant acknowledging in writing that a signature had been forged, and by whom. My statement sat in the file, plain and factual, and impossible to argue with, and the law simply took it from there, slow and grinding and utterly indifferent to the Bennett name. There would be a civil reckoning over the forgery, most likely. That part was never mine to drive or to forgive. That part just is, the way my lawyer had told me. The design reverted to me, its actual owner, exactly as the law had always quietly held it did. And the great machine my father had built, the one that ran on my silence, sputtered and stalled the moment I stopped feeding it, because it turned out it had never run on anything else. I didn't do it with leverage. I didn't do it with money, or a marriage, or a threat. I did it by declining to sign my name to a lie. In a quiet room, in a calm voice. One time, the smallest act possible. It brought the whole thing down, not because I was powerful, but because the whole thing had always been standing on the one word I finally refused to say. I would like to tell you that the family fell apart and everyone got what they deserved, but that's the Reddit version. And this one is the true one. Bennett Acoustics did not vanish. It shrank. The big deal died, but a smaller, honest one came along months later, once the records were straightened and the title was clean. And the company survived at a size that matched what it had actually earned, instead of what it had pretended to own. Dale kept his job. My father never once admitted he was wrong. To this day, he tells people I turned on the family over pride, and in his own mind, he is the wounded party, the founder betrayed by an ungrateful daughter. Because the thing about a man who was robbed young and decided robbery was tradition is that he cannot afford to see it any other way. My mother and I speak now and then, carefully, across a distance that no longer pretends to be closeness. She has never said she was sorry. I have stopped waiting for her too. Chloe is the surprise. She hasn't apologized either. Not really. But she went quiet, in a way that isn't her usual quiet. And once, months later, she called me just to ask how the design licensing worked. And she listened to the whole answer without a single joke. I don't know what that becomes. Maybe nothing. Maybe something. But for the first time in 35 years, my sister asked me a real question about my work, and waited for the real answer. I stopped hiding Adrian. That was the first thing I did when I got home to Chicago. Not a grand announcement. Just an end to the secrecy. Because the reason I had kept him hidden had finally dissolved. I had hidden my marriage from my family for the same reason I had hidden in the back of the panel. I had learned that anything I loved and let them see would be turned into either a joke or a resource. But I don't live in that house anymore, and I don't have to protect my happiness by making it invisible. The other thing I did took longer. Chloe has a daughter, my niece, 8 years old, sharp as a tack, already being told she's the dramatic one, the difficult one, the one who is too much. Last time I saw her, she asked me what I do. And instead of shrinking it into something small, I told her the truth. I make rooms where you can hear yourself think. I showed her how a panel works, how you can shape a silence instead of just enduring it. And I watched her file that away. The idea that a woman can build something, put her own name on it, and not have to apologize for taking up space. That's how you break a thing like this, not by winning a war. By making sure the next quiet girl in the family knows early that she never has to disappear to be loved. Panel 001 hangs in my studio now. When the deal collapsed and the assets were sorted, I bought back the original for almost nothing. Nobody else wanted a single old panel, and my father couldn't stand to look at it. It hangs on my studio wall in Chicago, and I turned it around. The front faces the wall now. The back faces the room. So that the first thing anyone sees when they walk in is the pale inner frame and the block letters of a 24-year-old who signed the only part of her work she thought no one would ever take. MB. And beneath it, the room where you can finally hear yourself think. Clients ask about it sometimes. I tell them the whole story or the short version, depending on the day. And here is the only wisdom I have to offer you after all of it. One sentence I would carve on the back of every quiet woman's life if I could. Forgiveness does not mean signing your name to the thing that erased you. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do for a family is refuse to disappear inside it. That is my story. A forged name, a quiet toast, a signature I never gave and finally refused to give again. If you have ever been the strong one, the quiet one, the one who kept the peace until it started costing you your own name, ask yourself tonight whether you are keeping a peace or funding a lie. Then do the brave, quiet thing. Thank you for being here. Drop a comment, hit subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.